Hey man, what are you doing?
The story and lore in horror gaming have always been a central element in my fascination with this genre. Horror is basically the only genre where a deep, ambiguous, and interesting story can be enough to produce a memorable game and provide the fear and curiosity that you want to experience. However, for me, everything reaches a whole new level when I discover that the events I'm witnessing in the game are not really as fictional as I thought. When you find out that the story you're going through in a horror game is inspired by real events in history, it always changes your mood completely, because then you become even more interested in discovering that history and learning how it happened. As I said in previous videos, I'm personally obsessed with diving deep into horror media with a basis in reality. And when I discover that true incidents played a role in its story, I become immediately determined to know more about those incidents. This is why I really enjoy making this type of video and love sharing my thoughts with you. I'm genuinely interested in your opinion about these stories, and I want to debate them with you. Long story short, after I made a video recently showcasing a new horror game that had a real-life disturbing reference in it, today I decided to go back in time and bring some games from the graves and put them in the spotlight again. It is not necessarily to explain their gameplay features or if you should play them or not, but simply because their stories are much deeper than you think, and most importantly, much more real than you think. The real-world events we'll be discussing today served as inspiration for two popular games. I'll give you a quick rundown of each game's story before diving into the historical events that shaped their dark narratives. So without further ado, let's start. The main game I want to talk about today is none other than Murdered Soul Suspect. If you're someone who followed E3 2013 very carefully and was very excited about the beginning of PS4 and Xbox One generation, then you're obviously familiar with this game. However, I'm pretty sure the only people who bought it are me and 6 other people living in the shadows somewhere on our planet. Anyway, the story here is a little bit complex because it involves 2 different dimensions. But to keep things simple, let's start with the elephant in the room, the protagonist. You play here as Ronan O'Connor, a detective who has a crazy history of being someone who doesn't really love following the law. He was initially a guy who throws himself into trouble and does some bad stuff and small crimes here and there, but this is mainly due to his harsh childhood. However, Ronan changed over time and decided to flip his life upside down by becoming an investigator who caught other criminals and saved his city. But sadly, this didn't work for him all the time because one night Ronan was hunting down a very dangerous criminal, and their confrontation didn't end well for Ronan. And by this, I mean that it ended in a disaster for him. During a very intense fight with the criminal, Ronan was brutally thrown out of the window, which basically led him to meet his fate. But just to be sure, the criminal then shot him 7 times in his body, ensuring his death for good. All of this happens at the beginning of the game, which seriously makes us wonder, if the protagonist is already dead, then how the heck will he continue the journey? Well, that's basically the catch in this game, as well as the part that makes it fascinating and unique. Because instead of moving on to the afterlife, Ronan literally finds himself walking around as a ghost and stuck in the mortal world. The only way he can end this crazy situation is by solving the mystery of his own murder. Yes, you heard it right. Ronan must find his own killer and understand how and why he died in order for his spirit to leave the real world. At this point, all we know is that the murderer is a mysterious serial killer known as the Bell Killer. The good side, however, is that, as a ghost, Ronan gains supernatural abilities, such as possessing people, walking through walls, and influencing the environment. He uses these abilities to investigate his own murder, gathering clues and interacting with other ghosts who haunt the place. And speaking of the place, I forgot to mention that the location here is Salem, Massachusetts, which is a real-life location in case you don't know. Along the way, Ronan discovers a dark history of witchcraft and murder in Salem, and learns that the Bell Killer is connected to a much larger conspiracy. We're not here to explain the story of the entire game and delve deep into every detail, because our main point in this video is to explain how it was inspired by real-world events. In order to know that, we need to first discover who the Bell Killer actually is and what his motivations are. Long story short, eventually we find out that the serial killer is a young evil girl called Abigail Williams. And if you're someone familiar with American history, then her name probably triggered some bells in your mind. But for those of you who are not familiar with her, let me give you a quick history lesson.
This place works then.
Works? This place isn't hard to understand. Figure out your gifts, and maybe you won't get trapped here.
Abigail Williams is a real historical figure who had a huge influence on a series of tragic events in the 17th century. These events are known as the infamous Salem witch trials, and they were basically a brutal chapter in American history, taking place in Salem, Massachusetts, between 1692 and 1693. The whole thing was fueled by fear, paranoia, and extremism, but Abigail Williams was arguably the main factor in escalating the mess even more and turning it into a massacre. But the real question is, who exactly is Abigail Williams?
Running through walls, making things appear. You look like you've been here a while.
Abigail was born in 1681 in colonial America, specifically in Salem, Massachusetts. She was an orphan who lost her parents at a very young age, and that's why she moved to live with her uncle Samuel Paris, who was a minister in the village. Details about Abigail's life with her uncle are scarce, but some accounts suggest she experienced harsh treatment and a lack of affection during her time in his care. Her life was relatively normal for several years there, playing with her friends and spending time together until 1692, when everything changed forever. She was 11 years old at the time, and one day when she was playing around with her friends, they started experiencing bizarre hallucinations and portraying unexplainable behavior. These behaviors included fits, screaming, and complaining about being bitten and pinched by unseen forces. At first, their families used traditional remedies to cure the girls, but nothing worked. The girls simply continued to complain about paranormal events and even claimed that they might be possessed. This is when the suspicion in the town turned to one last possible cause, which is none other than witchcraft. This is when the chaos started, and this is when Abigail, along with her friends, will begin orchestrating the tragedy of the Salem witch trials. After some pressure from the villagers, the girls officially claimed their victims of witchcraft, and they named 3 women as their tormentors. These 3 women are Tituba, a slave in the Paris household, Sarah Good, a poor 40-year-old woman who used to beg for money in the area, and Sarah Osborne, a 50-year-old housewife living next door. The sad part is that these 3 women already had a harsh life. Tituba was a slave who suffered cruel treatment. Sarah Good grew up as an orphan and lost her dad's house in a legal dispute, which led her to ask for charity and help from people to eat. And considering how life in general was hard then, asking for money from people was an absolute pain. Meanwhile, Sarah Osborne went through multiple misfortunes, from her husband's death to disputes with her children over a piece of land. In other words, these women were really miserable, and the last thing they needed in their lives was to be accused of witchcraft. But that's exactly what happened to them. After the accusations, the 3 women were arrested and subjected to public examinations. However, the problem in society during that era is that when you get accused of witchcraft, you are basically guilty until proven innocent.
The time is upon us, Abigail Williams.
All sides, including normal people, officers, and the judge, see suspects as criminals by definition. This dismal reality put huge pressure on Tituba's mind, and she started fearing for her life because she knew denying the accusations would not help her, and cooperating was her only way to have some mercy. This is why she eventually confessed to using witchcraft and even implicated others in the community. Her confession fueled an even stronger belief in a widespread conspiracy of witches. The fact that the three women were interrogated separately also led to every one of them being scared of any confession from the other two women that might be against her. As a result, they all turned against each other. Sarah Osborne started blaming Sarah Good and vice versa. This was just a desperate try by them to save their lives. However, their exaggerated confession led to an even bigger belief in witchcraft in the city, and more people were accused. The accusations spread beyond Salem Village, reaching neighboring towns, and many of the accused were marginalized individuals, such as the elderly, poor, or those who had a different culture than the norm. To deal with the growing number of accusations, a special court was established, and this court was responsible for trying the witchcraft cases, but its proceedings were often chaotic and biased. The court allowed supernatural evidence, which were the visions and dreams of accusers, as admissible proof of guilt. This opened the door to baseless claims and further fueled the hysteria. But despite these accusations, it was very hard for the court to confirm the guilt or innocence of each suspect. And this was when Abigail Williams started having the biggest role in leading people to their deaths. As time passed, Abigail Williams became the most prominent accuser in the whole place, claiming to be tormented by various townspeople and describing bizarre visions of spectral forms. Her accusations led to the arrests and trials of more than 200 people, but what made Abigail different is that she didn't stop after accusing them. As I said before, the court was such a mess, and they saw any compelling description or behavior from the accusers to be valid proof to convict suspects. This allowed Abigail and other girls to testify in the trials and showcase their evidence against the supposed witches.
It takes me to the ends of eternity. I will personally make the bell toll for every witch in Salem.
Even though all the girls were mostly exaggerating to convince the judge, Abigail simply took it to the next level. Abigail was known for her theatrical and emotional outbursts in court. She would often scream, faint, or convulse, claiming to be tormented by the unseen spirits of witches. These dramatic displays fascinated the court so much and fueled the belief that witchcraft was widespread in Salem. Abigail described crazy nightmares of supposed witches harming her. She also claimed to see them flying on broomsticks, transforming into animals, and performing other supernatural actions. These detailed accounts, while lacking any physical evidence, were taken seriously by the court. In other words, the judge was fascinated by Abigail's ability to describe all these events despite being a very young girl. Furthermore, Abigail delivered her testimony with unwavering confidence, even when faced with inconsistencies or challenges from the accused. Her strong tone gave credibility to her bizarre claims, despite the lack of tangible proof. The fact that she was outspoken and very angry at the suspects made people believe in her honesty and see her as the most credible accuser. But that's not all, because Abigail's behavior also influenced the other accusers. The girls often duplicated her actions and echoed her accusations, creating a sense of corroboration that further solidified the belief in a crisis of witchcraft. Some historians even believe Abigail may have manipulated and coached the other girls to reinforce her accusations. She told them what to say and how to behave in order to become believable. This means she had a deliberate intent to deceive judges and achieve her own ends, whatever they may have been. Besides, there are instances where Abigail intentionally manipulated evidence or exaggerated her claims to further incriminate the accused.
Fresh paint, this one's just been done.
The witch who flew from her own mother, herself a witch, herself in flight.
She'll meet her death like so many other and leave both realms this very night.
For example, she once claimed to have found a doll with a needle stuck in it, suggesting that it was used by a witch to harm her. She showed the doll to the court, but she had no proof that it belonged to anyone in the town. But it doesn't matter because, as I said before, being a suspect makes you pretty much guilty by default, and any evidence against you is seen as truth. The crazy part is that she was fully aware that her claims could lead people to face execution, and yet she somehow didn't have any problem with that. Her actions contributed incomparably to the chaotic and unjust nature of Salem witch trials. Her dramatic accusations and confident testimony played a crucial role in the conviction of many innocent people. After several months of insane trials, 19 people were tragically executed, including both Sarah Good and Sarah Osborne, the two innocent women I mentioned earlier. Other people died in prison while awaiting trial due to bad treatment and health problems. All of these people were innocent, and they tried every possible way to prove it, yet their words were not taken seriously in any way. What's even more disturbing is Abigail was enjoying watching these people die in front of her. She used to smile watching them in their last moments, and she felt proud that she contributed to leading them to this fate. With that being said, historians are still, to this day, confused about her motives and unable to determine a clear reason. Some historians believe she genuinely thought she was a victim of witchcraft, while others suggest she may have fabricated her claims due to personal grievances or a desire for attention. The reason they believe she may have been honest in her feelings is because of how society operated at the time. Witchcraft accusations were very common, and young girls like Abigail were probably motivated by that culture. However, other historians have different opinions. Many believe Abigail was intentionally lying because she wanted other people to suffer due to her miserable life. Abigail's parents were both murdered by locals in a home invasion during her early years, and she was forced to live with her harsh uncle. Generally, it is said that her uncle Samuel Paris treated her like a servant, and in some cases, he probably used verbal or even physical abuse against her. However, the speculation doesn't stop there. Other researchers also said Abigail was probably desiring power and dominance because as a girl in Puritan society, she held little social power. The trials offered her an opportunity to gain attention, influence, and even a sense of authority over adults. Her accusations, regardless of the truth, made her the center of attention in the community and gave her the ability to feel that she could punish others. More historians even went further and said she may have also had personal grievances against certain individuals she accused. For example, she accused Elizabeth Proctor, wife of John Proctor, with whom Abigail had an affair, which could suggest a motive of jealousy and revenge. She also accused Tituba and had very hard feelings for her, because Tituba was married to an indigenous man. She may have a personal problem with that, because Abigail's parents were said to have been killed by native inhabitants during a time when the tension between settlers and natives was sky high. I mean, don't forget we're talking about 17th century America here, but please bear with me, because historians have more thoughts about this. Some suggest that Abigail did this because she was afraid of punishment. Abigail and her friends were known for playing around a lot in the woods, and if they indeed were engaging in forbidden activities in the woods, as some accounts claim, her accusations might have been a desperate attempt to deflect blame and avoid punishment. By pointing fingers at others, she could divert attention away from herself and her own potential transgressions. Regardless of any specific reason, it is possible all these elements played a role in Abigail's actions. However, her attitude towards victims and her joy in seeing them die pushed me towards believing she was really enjoying seeing others suffer because of her sad life, and also because she really had personal problems with them.
The guy who killed me is Abigail. She might be the Bell Killer. How is that possible?
Now that I've explained Abigail's possible motives and what happened in the witch trials, It's time to talk about what happened next. Well, even though Abigail's performance in court was so compelling, it was expected that it could not last forever without raising some suspicions. As the trials progressed, some members of the community began to question the validity of the accusations and the methods used in the trials. Prominent figures, such as Increase Mather, an influential Puritan minister, expressed doubts about the reliance on invisible evidence. More and more people started to feel the accusations made no sense and were becoming too repetitious. As a result, the trials eventually came to an end in 1693, as public opinion shifted and the governor of Massachusetts intervened. The remaining prisoners were released by paying bail, and the court was dissolved. Tituba also survived, and her owner, Samuel Paris, paid her bail to release her. However, the real question now is, what the heck happened to Abigail after this? Well, that's the billion-dollar question that even historians are dying to find an answer to. The fate of Abigail Williams after Salem witch trials remains a mystery. Her last documented appearance in court records is on June 3, 1692, after which she literally disappears entirely from historical accounts. The most popular theory is Abigail simply left Salem and never came back. She may have changed her name, moved very far away, or died young, and due to the limited documentation of events at the time, her life after the trials remains unknown. Some historians assume Abigail left Salem Village with her uncle when he was fired from his position in 1697, while other scholars have a much more tragic theory for her fate. They say she may have been killed young by the authorities or even by the villagers after she got exposed for her lies. However, other theories also claim that people might have thought that she's a real witch due to her evil intentions. It is possible that authorities saw Abigail as the ultimate form of a witch after they found out that she was lying and manipulating events all the time. In fact, this is basically how Abigail was represented in Murdered Soul Suspect. Abigail here is depicted as a vengeful spirit who was executed for her role in the witch trials and continues to haunt Salem even after her death. At first, we see her as a mysterious serial killer who murdered multiple people in the city, and as we investigate, we discover that her motives are driven by a desire for revenge against those who wronged her in life and a thirst for power. She believes that by killing mediums, she can become stronger and build her reign of horror. The reason games and movies chose this theory is because we simply don't know why Abigail did what she did to this day. The girl vanished from history after the Salem witch tragedy and was never spotted again.
You claim righteousness, but you know your guilt and cannot deny your punishment is due.
I thought you stood for justice. How is this just?
The courts are not a place for your murderous whimsy. You are a corrupt heathen. The families of those innocent souls you executed through false accusation of witchcraft will exact their righteous justice tonight.
False accusation?
This is insane because you would expect a historical figure like this, who had a huge influence on a very scary chapter of American history, would have a bigger presence in historical records, especially since these events happened in the last few centuries and not thousands of years ago. We don't know if she died at a young age or if she lived a long life somewhere else. And as I said before, all the possible reasons I mentioned for her motives can be true. If we want to give her the benefit of the doubt and take her young age into consideration, we can say that she might have believed she was really a victim of witchcraft. People around her might have played a role in her assumption because such claims were taken very seriously, and their reaction might have escalated her confusing situation. The problem with this theory, however, is that it doesn't explain why Abigail accused specific people and why she was happy to see them die. Accusing her lover's wife to get rid of her also seems very suspicious, because it gives us a hint that Abigail had some personal problems with her victims. Another motive I forgot to mention earlier is that it's possible Abigail might have wanted to become a witch herself, because she saw it as a source of power, which could help her in her miserable life. Some claims say that she was interested in witchcraft and might have wanted to try it on multiple occasions, even with her friends. This can explain her fear of punishment that I mentioned before. I'm giving you every theory out there because I'm seriously interested in knowing your thoughts about her story and her fate.
You made me kill her. If I'm going out, you're coming with me.
And by the way, the other major horror game that features Salem Witch Trials and Abigail Williams is actually an upcoming game that I'm personally waiting for. It's called Witches of the New World, and it really looks insanely interesting because it's designed to be a Souls-like experience. I'm definitely planning to talk about it extensively in the future. Anyway guys, this is all for today. Please make sure to give us a like and subscribe if you're new, but most importantly, give me your opinion in the comments below on anything I explained in the video. What are your thoughts on Abigail, your ideas about her life after the trials, and whether you believe she died young or simply changed her name and lived a secret life elsewhere? Everything is possible. And by the way, if you want to support the channel, then you can join as a member for only $1 to help us produce content regularly. Anyway, this is it for now, and I hope to see you soon.